Hey there, and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Kara, and I'm also new here because you're watching my first ever video on YouTube. Technically, I have posted something before this. It's this exact video, this exact time lapse, but without the commentary. But this will be the first video that I myself technically feature in. I don't have a camera yet. I'm figuring out some technical details, but for now, you get to listen to my wonderful voice. On a side note, I have no idea if my voice is pleasant to listen to or not. This is gonna be interesting for me. It's gonna be interesting for you. Let's get into the video. So today we're gonna be looking at this piece that I've called Novalunosis. Now, at the time that I created the file and I had the idea, it was not called Novalunosis, this fancy word that I spent 15 minutes Googling trying to find. I called it my 2023 lock screen. And the reason I call it that is because I have this tradition that my first illustration of the year is my phone screen for the rest of the year. So last year, I'll show you, this is what my phone screen was. It was of another OC couple that I have, and I was really going for that romanticism vibe and whatnot. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much that I almost didn't want to replace it, but I like to challenge myself and make a new piece that kind of sets the tone for the year. So that's how I came up with this idea. So here I'll show you what my references are. And as you can see, we have one main reference for the pose and one main reference for the vibe and a few other references just to show kind of more details of what I'm trying to render. I'm trying to do this thing where I use more and more references so I don't just wing anatomy and shading and cloth texture, but as you can see in this video as it continues, I did end up winging a lot of it. So for the rest of the year, I'm going to continue to try and use more and more references and get in the habit of doing that. So right now I'm working on the sketch process. Now I like to do two different sketches. I like to do basically the thumbnail sketch where it's all scribbles, it's just capturing the overall composition, the overall placement of the body, the overall mood that we're going for. And then the second sketch I like to do is the refined sketch, where basically I go in with a little more detail, a little more focus on what exactly I want the final piece to look like. So this is not the time for, there is some experimentation at this point, but there's not too much. I've already decided what important features there are going to be. So continuing, as you can see here, this is the refined sketch layer. I'm really going in on that hair and trying to figure out what to do with it. I never know what outfits or hairstyles anyone's going to have until I get to that refined sketch layer. I don't really bother with that in the thumbnail sketch unless it's important for the overall composition. But here I'm just trying out different hairstyles because I always have this character have her hair down with nothing fancy to it, and I was trying to figure out if I could spice it up a bit. I did end up just doing the straight hair down. I think it's her iconic look at this point, so I didn't want to change it up too much. Now, I forgot to introduce these characters. So these two are my couple from my webcomic Binary Stars. This is Anastasia and Ian. Most of my art revolves around them. I myself am a single Pringle, so I love to draw my characters in love. It's how I cope with the crushing loneliness I deal with in my day-to-day. And if anyone I know in real life is listening to this video, for legal reasons, that's a joke. Please don't call me and say that you're concerned about me, because then I'll know you watched this video and I can't handle that kind of embarrassment right now. Anyway, so we're continuing on. So now I'm working on the line art, and when I approach line art, I pretty much only have two approaches. The first approach is called Fuck It, We Ball, and the lines I put down are the lines that I'm going to work with, knowing that eventually I'm going to probably render over them or nitpick at it. How do I word this? Yeah, basically this is the Fuck It, We Ball technique, where I slap the line art down, knowing in the future I'm gonna render over it. The second way I approach line art is being meticulous about it. Since this piece was intended to be my phone screen, I wanted it to be perfect. And I fall into this trap sometimes where I'll sketch something, I'll line it, I'll be like, perfect, this looks great. I'll put some flat colors onto it, and then I realize that the composition is totally wonky. And at that point, I feel I've spent too much time and I've made too much progress to go back and change anything. So then I continue on with the wonky composition. But for this, I wanted to get it right early on so I didn't have to worry about it in the rendering process. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap where they're really, really good at rendering, but rendering can't hide bad anatomy. Sometimes it can, but sometimes it doesn't. And I'm definitely in the camp of artists that I don't think my rendering can cover up any mistakes in anatomy. For here, because I was going to be looking at this every day, I wanted to make sure that it was going to be good. And I had a little trouble with her facial expression, mainly because I always draw this character kind of looking sad, eyes closed, or like in profile. I either draw her looking sad, looking mysterious, or from the profile. So here it was a 3/4 view, looking down with a half smile, but in a romantic way. Now his face, I don't even want to talk about, because I definitely at that point was like, fuck it, we ball. I love drawing ladies more than I like drawing men. So I will say he has a little more anatomical issues with his face, but I think that man just generally has anatomical issues with his face. That's not my problem. Yes, I made him, but that's not my problem. So here comes the next fun part. I rarely come up with color palettes for my pieces beforehand. As you just saw, I literally went into another piece of mine that's already been fully rendered out, fully finished, and I color picked the colors that I need. Very rarely do I try to pick all the colors by themselves, if that makes sense. I rarely pick new colors. I already had colors for these people. I didn't want to spend time fiddling around with the color wheel, trying to figure out, oh, was it this shade of red? What's this shade of yellow? I'm done with that. So I color picked from another piece. And these are characters that I've drawn before. They have their iconic outfits. She's always wearing white. He's always wearing black because they're opposites. Whoa, look at that. That's so cool. Okay, anyway, back to the actual art of it. Okay, so line art finished. I change it to overlay. And with overlay, we can then blend in the line art with the rendering. Now, some people might ask, why spend so much time on the line art if you're just going to cover it up with the rendering? The answer is, I don't really have an answer. I'm kind of an idiot. For some reason, in my monkey brain, it just makes more sense to blend the line art in with the rendering. Now, some artists, and like big artists, Renaissance artists, Sandro Botticelli to be specific, if you look close enough at his rendering, you can see lines. You can see his, for lack of a better term, line art. Now, I'm sure he didn't refer to it as a line art, but you can see lines. And that helped distinguish shapes and limbs, body parts, elements. So this is not a new technique. I'm actually borrowing from a Renaissance artist. So actually what I said a couple minutes back, however many minutes back, about me being an idiot, I'm actually a genius, a Renaissance level genius. Okay, we're moving on. So I don't have much to say about rendering. Rendering is a lot of layering and covering things up in the hopes that it will look good eventually. If that doesn't make sense, that's okay. It didn't make sense when I just said it. If you make a mistake with the rendering, sometimes covering it up creates this texture that is much better than getting the rendering right the first time. So when it comes to rendering, I think of it as sculpting with light, and I never think of any rendering as being bad rendering, because sometimes good rendering requires that bad rendering to be good. I now sound like an idiot. Look at her titties. Don't listen to what I'm saying because I'm a moron. Anyway, one goal of mine for this year is definitely to get better at rendering fabric. So you'll see a lot of probably me trying to render fabric a bit better this year and focusing on pieces that have a lot of fabric. His face was tough. It was a complicated angle, and having to find cheekbones, changes with every single different lighting scenario imaginable. Let's not even get started on that angle of his shoulders and back. I wish I could show you the reference I ended up using for his shoulder and back, but I can't because I used 15 different pictures to basically guess what that angle would look like with that lighting. And sometimes that's what art is, just making a guess and hoping that no one knows anatomy well enough to call you out on it. So if any new artists are watching this, don't worry, it gets better. Not really, but you just learn to bullshit a bit better. I don't know if I can swear. I'm new to YouTube. Can I say bullshit? Anyway, rendering his hand touching her arm was my favorite part. I love drawing the tendons on the back of the hand. Knuckles, not so much, but I think tendons with hands in dramatic poses are always fun. Now the veil kind of hit and miss on my part. I really wanted them to be covered by a veil, but then when I started rendering the veil out, I realized that it covered up a lot of their features and important bits that I just spent hours rendering, so I didn't want to do it. But then I do change my mind later. Now the flowers are a brush that's default in Clip Studio. I was not about to hand render flowers, and if you can see in the reference, flowers play a big part of it. I wanted the flowers in there really badly, but I just didn't feel like rendering them all out. But you can see that I cheated a little bit with a little bit of the glow layer and the multiply layer, just trying to give it a bit of depth without actually having to render each individual petal. Think smarter, not harder. Because most of the time, people are going to look at faces of pieces. They're not going to look at that cool little fold of clothing you did or that flower that you rendered so lovingly. Now, the people who do, you're amazing. I love you. You're the best part about doing art. But let's be honest, majority of the time, people are just going to glance at this, especially if they're on social media. So don't worry too much about the details. And so now we're wrapping it up. And to wrap it up, I always throw on a saturation layer, a contrast layer, a hue layer if I'm feeling really spicy. Because most of definitely a glow layer. One last glow layer because I love glowy bits. I never get the rendering right the first time. I have never accomplished a piece where by the end of it, I said, yeah, that's terrific rendering, I'm done. No, I always add on something extra. So yeah, here's the final piece. As you can see, I wish, looking back on it, I wish I'd spent a little more time on the veil, and I wish I had picked an easier pose to draw Ian in. Anastasia had a really good pose, and I wanted to show Ian's face really badly, but this was not the best way to show his face. But that's my thoughts on it. You all are free to leave your thoughts. I love hearing feedback. Let me know what you think. And thank you for watching my first ever time-lapse commentary on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna say that I finally get to say it. Like and leave a comment, like and subscribe, or what is it? What do people say? If you enjoyed this video, like and leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already. That's what they say. Now this video's gone on for way too long.